She's here. And then we have Deborah. She's here as well. Okay, everyone's here. Okay, welcome. Okay, so you can take out your Svarim. Those of you that have them, I hope you have Svarim. We're on page Kosher. We're going to finish. I think we're going to finish the sugya today of Kosher. We're getting close to the end. We're up to page Kosher, Halacha Rabbi. Yeah, Beis Hashem will finish today. I hope. So we're going to learn about koshering. We spoke about koshering regular ovens last week, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, last week we spoke about koshering regular ovens. This week we're going to cover the subject about koshering microwaves. Today we live in a very fast-paced society, and everything's instant. So a microwave, the question becomes, can you kosher a microwave? A microwave does not work the same way as a regular oven. Page Chavches, 28. A microwave works with rays. So there are different opinions amongst halachic authorities whether or not you can kosher a microwave. Everybody seems to agree that you can kosher a microwave from kosher to kosher. So let's say, for example, I have a fleshik microwave, kosher, now I want to make it milchik. From kosher to kosher is an easier transition. That could be done, whether or not you can kosher a microwave from non-kosher to kosher, or from chametz to Pesach. Some rabbanim are against doing so, and they advise not to do so. So it's better to abstain from doing that. If a person has a very expensive microwave, maybe they could be lenient, but in general, it's better not to kosher a microwave from treif to kosher or from chametz to Pesach. How does one kosher a microwave? I'm just going to detail it outside before we read it inside. A microwave, basically, you take like 3 or 4 cups of styrofoam, fill them up to the top, put it inside the microwave, and turn on the microwave for about 25 minutes, let's say. And then you have the water circling around on the tray, and it's going to steam out. After about 15 minutes, move the position of the cups so that the area where the cups are sitting on the glass will also get steam. It's better to actually dip the glass itself in boiling water, if possible, like a boiling pot, but that's how you would actually kosher the actual cavity, actual housing of the microwave itself. Make sure it's clean. The area where the vent is, make sure it's clean, etc. Halacha Chavches, din taner microwave gal vadrema din taner gas. Now, can you use the same microwave for flesheks and milchiks? If you're covering the opposite kind during the heating process, you can do that. Now, of course, in a microwave, you cannot bring in any metal, but if you cover something with cardboard or plastic, it's not too healthy, but so if you properly double wrap it, you can do so. And as I said, in terms of koshering it, some say you could kosher a microwave if you wait 24 hours from use. In other words, you don't let it, you let it sit idle for 24 hours. Thank you. So you leave the water in there and let it boil out. Ask Shaila whether or not that's acceptable. No, that really gets to what I said earlier, that if you're koshering a microwave from non-kosher to kosher, it's better not to. Because from kosher to kosher, it's acceptable according to all opinions. When I travel, I usually bring my own cooking device with me. Like I'll bring a sandwich maker and I'll heat some food up that way. But sometimes when I didn't have my own device, I would kosher the microwave in the hotel, but I'd still double wrap my food because the microwave in the hotel was used for treif. So I would double wrap my food, but this way I'd kosher it just in case the double wrapping opened up, so I koshered it so I have a safety net. That's the way I would advise doing. Another story I can just tell you. Speaking of traveling, I was once traveling. I think I was in Connecticut, and I brought along a toaster oven with me as my heating, for my supper. And it was an old toaster oven. It died in the hotel, so I couldn't use it. It was kind of so I had this supper I was trying to warm up, so I brought it downstairs to the lobby, and I asked the attendant at the hotel if I can go and warm this up in their oven. I said, sure. So I said, I keep kosher, I got to watch you do it. And they got me silver foil. I wrapped my food, double wrapped it, and I stood there, and they put it into the oven. They let me stand in the kitchen watching it in the oven for like 30 minutes. I stood there the whole time because I'm making sure no one's opening it in the oven because I would make it not kosher. And they took it out, sealed, and then I had to get hot food. You can do that. Just letting you know that if you're ever stuck, you can do that. Okay, now halacha of test.
So we can use it, just need to be closed.
Double wrap.
Double wrap.
Yes.
Double wrap. And also, is it important when you kosher it to use a one?
Well, you need to have a cup so it can steam out water.
No, but if I put a glass.
Glass cup is also fine. Yeah. Now, another thing that if you look in some kind of kitchens, this is more like in, I would say, commercial kitchens and some rustic type of look. I don't know, maybe in Manhattan they have this as well, where they hang the pots on top of the stove area, right? So you don't put the pots inside drawers, but you hang them from, so if you look in commercial kitchens, that's what the chefs are just pulling pots off. So if the pots are hanging very low, think about it. Imagine that this is my stove top and the pots are hanging like this. And if I've got chicken soup, like, till here, steaming up, and I've got a milchik frying pan, like right nearby, the steam is going to go into the milchik frying pan. It's going to cause a bleed. It's going to create a kashrus problem. So really, you just have to be cognizant and be aware of this potential issue. If you have about 3 feet of headspace between the height of the highest pot and the lowest point of the pots that are hanging, so then the steam that's going to emanate is going to be not hot anymore by the time it touches the pot. It's going to be less than Yatzei Ledes by. Because after 3 feet of going into the ambient temperature, it's going to just cool down. So then you're not going to have a problem. If it hangs very low, it's very close, it could be a potential problem. Just be aware of that. You should refrain from hanging spoons, pots, pans, whatever it is, from on top of the pots, on top of the stovetop. If the steam is going to reach the top of these, the top of the pots, the steam is going to reach the lowest point of whatever's hanging, then it's a problem. Like it's going to create an absorption of basar v'chol that's going to make it asr. Therefore, you should refrain from doing so. On the stovetop, we have grates. That's where the pots sit on. The grates themselves are very interesting because they kind of kasher themselves out. Are you turning on a flame under a grate? It's getting direct fire on it, especially when you put down a pot, because the fire is now going to spread. So it really kashers itself out. So according to halacha, in the strict letter of the law, you're not required to have separate grates for meat and for dairy because they kasher themselves out. They don't really become one status. They're always getting kashered. But the minig, the expression goes, Yisrael Kadeshim Heim B'nog B'hem Minig Yisrael. Yisrael, the Jewish people are a holy nation, and the machmir, the minig is to have separate, to designate ones that are separate for fleishiks and milchiks. It's just there's an extra zahiris, there's an extra area of security in case you have some spillage on the grate or something of that nature. The grates that the pots sit on, you don't have to have separate ones for basar v'chol. You can use one grate to cook a fleishik food, or in the reverse, whatever spills from the food on the grate, it probably burns off right away. If you see a little bit of remnants of food, certainly you have to clean it off. Some people are machmir to designate grates for meat and for dairy, to have separate ones. And as I said, it's a hither to do so. The next subject we're going to cover is about dairy bread. And it's going to go for the next really 4 halachas, actually 5 halachas, I should say, because the Chachamim established certain laws that are not found in the Torah. It's rabbinic in nature. And the Chachamim establish laws that are designed as areas of protection, so we don't come to violate an Issa Torah. Whenever you have a rabbinic prohibition, it's usually there as a fence to prevent us from mistakenly violating an Issa Torah. So the Chachamim said that bread has a unique feature about it because it's the kind of food that's eaten together with other foods. Bread is something that's connected with a meal. So because bread has a universal quality to it, they made a prohibition that you're not allowed to make bread milchiks or fleishiks. It has to be parv. Now, there are some exceptions when you're allowed to make bread milchiks. I'll explain them. But in general, you're not allowed to do so. And the reason is because if you're going to have bread that's milchiks, someone's not going to realize. I'm just going to turn that off, if you don't mind. Someone's not going to realize, and they're going to mistakenly serve that bread at a fleishik meal, like tonight's already. Tomorrow night's going to be Shabbos, and then it could be a fleishik meal. It could be mamash b'chol b'chol. They're having milchik of bread. They're eating their chicken soup, or they're having some other fleishik of food. Mamash b'chol b'chol. It's a serious issue. So in order to prevent from such a likely mistake, they said you're not allowed to make the bread milchiks in the first place. You're not allowed to do so. And the same would be with fleishiks. If you make bread fleishiks, someone might decide to have it in the morning with their eggs and cheese. It's a problem. So that's why the Chazal with Deirish, they made a gzeira that you're not allowed to make bread fleishiks or milchiks. Halacha Rabbi Hanoka inside page Chavtes. Gozer Chazal shein lo l'shisa b'chol b'mnei shechosher shema yavi lecha l'lechem emabasar. The Chazal said you're not allowed to bake bread milchiks because we're afraid you might come to eat the bread together with basar, with fleishiks. The same as in the reverse. You're not allowed to knead bread with meat, like fat and the like. There's a concern you might come to eat it with dairy. Because that's the norm. You eat meat or milk with bread. Chacham were very, very stringent with this issue. They said if you're going to bake bread with dairy, the whole bread becomes asur. Not only you're not allowed to do so, but even if you did do so, you're not allowed to have the bread. It becomes like not kosher. You're not even allowed to eat the bread by itself. Since Sadik Zayin a year there. Because the concern is maybe you're going to come to eat it also with meat, because that's very common.
That's when you make the bread, and when you bake it, you fleishik oven or in the dairy oven.
That's another question. That's allowed. We'll discuss that soon. You're correct. I'm talking about actually putting dairy ingredients in the bread itself. That's what's not allowed. I remember when I was a child, it was on Purim, and my mother, Allah Shalom, she received mishloach manos from a neighbor. It was menorah bread. It was a bread made mamish in the shape of a menorah, very ornate, very pretty, like a piece of artwork. And it was dairy. And I remember putting it in the freezer, and because it had such a funny shape, we're always going to remember, okay, this is dairy. We're going to learn in a moment that if you make it a funny shape, you're allowed to make it dairy or fleishiks. You're allowed to make it, because then you're going to remember. The issue is you're not allowed to make regular bread. Yes?
Does this only apply to like kneading the area into the dough, or are you allowed to like fill bread with like cheese or something?
Excellent question. So the prohibition applies to make when you're actually kneading it, making it as a dough. Once the bread's already baked as pod, you can put anything you want on it because you see what it is.
But what if it's like rolled up inside the bread before it's baked?
If it's rolled up in a way you can't see it, it's a problem. If you were to bake a bread with strips of cheese on top, it's permissible because you can see that. But you're not allowed to do it in a way where it's not blatantly obvious that it's dairy. Din pasketano, so the Chachamim gave like a couple of, I would say, passes or situations where it's allowed to bake as dairy. If you have just a small batch of bread, it's enough. It's just enough to finish only in one day. Like chashuv sheichlen basar, then they're not concerned you're going to come to eat it with meat. Ki bevada yizkar be'isayim shenilei shemchav, because you're certainly going to remember. This morning you're busy. You made challah today, and you made it with milk. So you'll remember that. Okay, today's bread is dairy. Even if you made more than enough for one person, so let's say you have a household of 5 people, and you made 5 portions of bread, and then it's enough that what your family would eat in one day, then it's permissible to make the bread milchitz. Because you're going to remember what you did that same day. Once already a day passes, it's in the freezer, you're not going to remember anymore. Another thing that's allowed in terms of milchik bread is if you make the bread in a funny shape, an unusual shape. So if it's an unusual shape, you're going to say, oh, this shape bread, menorah bread is always milchitz. Well, that's how it's made. That's how we make it. If I make, let's say, bread in the shape of a shofar, that's my fleshik bread, whatever. You know, if I make the milchik bread in a tzuriyim michedus, means an unusual shape. So you're going to remember, you're going to recognize this is a different kind of bread. I'm not going to eat it together with meat. Then you're allowed to eat it, even if you bake the larger mass of bread, because it has an unusual shape, so it has its own built-in siman to say, oh yes, this is dairy. In addition to this, if you can see that it's, let's say, fleshik, because you see a strip of meat on top of it, or in the reverse, you see it's dairy because you see a strip of cheese on it, you also let it cook. Any questions on what I said so far? Halacha Lamed ugos hamamulois bepeiros. I have pastries that are filled with fruits. So you don't eat. Let's say, for example, I have a rugala, or I have a filled pastry. Let's say it's a raspberry kind of tart or something of that nature. So that's something you eat at the end of the meal. You don't usually eat that in the middle of the meal. It's a sweet just to kind of wash down the food. So since you don't eat it together in the middle of the meal, we're not choishish that if that would be dairy, I'm going to come to eat that with meat. Because it's not the kind of food you eat together with meat. You eat it at the end of the meal. So then we're not concerned maybe you're going to come to eat it with meat. Then you're allowed to make such a thing, even though it's made together with dairy, because it's meant more as a dessert type of item. So the prohibition against making bread dairy or meat, or bread meat, either one, only applies to bread itself. When it comes to pastries that are dessert items, they are allowed to be made dairy because they're not designed to eat together in the meal itself. You eat it at the end of the meal. And we're not choishish, you can eat it together with meat itself. Now, you can ask a question, well, if you have a fleshik meal, you're still not allowed to have dairy for dessert. You're right. But the prohibition in the Torah is to eat meat and milk together. The waiting period is already rabbinically interpreted. And the Chachamim did not make a prohibition against that. As a concern, you might come to violate that. You're not allowed to do it. So you're allowed to make pastries dairy because it's not the derech ha'olam, it's not the normal way to eat pastries together with meat.
I didn't understand Lamed.
What?
I didn't understand Lamed.
Okay, I'll say it again. You go to the bakery and you buy a cheese Danish. It's sweet, and it's just meant to eat as a snack, as a dessert. You don't make a meal out of cheese Danishes. So we're not concerned you're going to take a cheese Danish and have it together with your steak. It's not the way it's designed. It's not what it is. Bread is designed to eat together with a meal. For example, let's say I'm having bread. I might take some bread and have some gravy on it and eat together with the gravy. It's meant to eat together. But a dessert item is meant to eat after, they'll even market it and design it and say, oh, this is the perfect thing to wash down your food. A nice dessert, it washes down the food, etc. Okay. Halacha Lamed Hey. This prohibition about a lot of bread that's needed with milk without a unique shape. It starts at the time of the baking. Since the bread becomes also at the time of the baking, it has no heter forever. If you bake for yourself, let's say, many loaves of bread, And then you go and you give it out to many people. Let's say, for example, I baked 100 pounds of bread, and it's all milchiks, and my family could only eat, let's say, 5 pounds of bread. I have another 95 pounds to give out. I give out to the whole community. It's not good, because it's only permissible to bake enough bread that your family can consume in one day. You can't give it out. At the time of the kneading of the dough, if I made a milchik but in a way that's not permissible, the bread becomes asur. I'm not allowed to eat it. That clear? So you cannot be misak in the bread by saying, "Oh, I'm giving it out. They're going to finish it." No, it all basically works with the framework of your family. Your family can consume 5 pounds of bread a day. If you have a lot of people there, then you're allowed to make up to 5 pounds of bread dairy that day, and you have to consume it that day. If you have a little left over, you can finish it, but you're not supposed. It has to be enough for 1 day's consumption. Okay. Any questions on the whole subject? Halacha Lamed Vav. Let's move on. Now, the next two halachas get into segregation. In our kitchens, we have separate cutlery, pots, hands, everything, right? Meat and dairy, separate. What happens if mistakenly I took a fleischiger knife, cold, clean, and I cut let's say I used it to smear cream cheese? I'm not supposed to do that. So if it's just cold and the knife was clean, you're not supposed to do it. But if you did it, then you have to rinse the knife in cold water, or water that's not hot, clean it, and then you could. You don't have to do anything beyond that. If someone mistakenly used a fleischiger utensil for a milchike food, or in the reverse, if the food or the vessel was not hot to the degree of Yatzer Ledisbei, which is 113 degrees or less Fahrenheit. So then the food and the pot is fine. If someone used a fleischiger knife to cut cheese and both of them were cold, you can kosher it by stabbing it into untouched earth 10 times.
And how? If it's hard cheese, right?
If it's not hot. Let me explain.
Hard cheese.
That's correct. Yeah.
Not if it's like soft cheese.
Soft you wouldn't really need to do that. That's correct. Yeah. Let me just explain. There's two parts of koshering something. If this is going to be my imaginary knife, right? If I use this knife, let's say it's a fleischiger knife, and it's clean, I mistakenly go and cut hot cheese, let's say I have a piece of hot cheese, and say it's a cheese sandwich, right? Whatever, and I cut right through it. Now I've got a problem because the knife absorbed hot cheese inside it. So I've got two issues. I've got a taste of cheese that's inside the metal of the knife. And I also have all the schmutz, all the cheese that's the remnants that's on the blade. So the remnants on the blade, I can take care of by cleaning it with soap or, rubbing it with steel wool or stabbing it into the ground 10 times in untouched earth. Because what does this mean, stabbing into the ground? It sounds like a medieval thing that's a little spooky, right? You go like this. Imagine you see the Jewish people going in the backyard doing this. It'll make a good film, The Hasidim go out late at night and stab their knives. So, but why is it? What does it mean? It's a very practical thing, actually. It's just it's a way of creating a certain amount of abrasive friction on the knife itself, and that's how you're going to clean the blade. Today, you can take steel wool and rub it inside your kitchen. It's the same effect. But in the olden days, they didn't have steel wool, so they'd go in the back and they just do that, and that's how after doing it 10 times, you're sure the blade was clean. But that does not absorb what's already. Does not address what's already been absorbed into the knife. So if you're cutting something cold, it's enough just to stab in the ground or to use steel wool and clean it. But if it was hot, you have to actually kosher with fire or something like that. Depends on the shiloh. Sometimes the food will be kosher with the oven and sometimes not. If the knife was not used in 24 hours, then the food will be kosher. in that case. But the knife still needs to be kosher. I don't know.
If we don't know if the knife used,
Then there's a klal.
if you don't know, so.
There's a klal that stam kelim in a yoyman. If it's not likely to be used every day, then you can go with a klal that it wasn't used that day. In B'toris Ishtam Shekli B'Sar L'Machalav you'll have if someone mistakenly used a fleshka food or dairy food or the in the reverse. And if the food or the vessel was not Yatzuledes by Medichas Akli B'Mayim Tzeinim and Peshim Lechamin. Then you rinse it off in cold. So the example I gave you before, I take a fleshka knife out of the drawer, it's cold and clean, and then I use it to smear cream cheese. It's a cold experience, right? It's all cold. There's no real absorption to the so then I have to just rinse it off in water that's ambient temperature or less, not hot, less than 113 F. And the same would be if I use, let's say, hard cheese. If it was cold, I just have to clean the blade, either through steel wool or by stabbing it into the ground. If the food was hot, then I got a problem. Or if I let milchiks, I got milk and it's sitting in a fleshika vessel for 24 hours. So now it's pickling, it's going to absorb. You have to ask a shayla if the food is mutter, permissible, but or whether or not the vessel needs to be kosher. There are those that make a mistake, they err. You can kosher every knife that needs to be koshered. I feel is even to use it for hot. I need to become kosher zutais. They think that even a knife that was absorbed hot, I can then stab in the ground 10 times. That's not correct. The stabbing in the ground only addresses whatever's on the blade on the outside. Makes sense, right? Because you have that friction going down, the pressure, the penetration. But whatever is absorbed inside the walls of the knife has to be kosher through fire or boiling water, depending on the application. Any questions before we move on? One more halacha? No?
We didn't address the question about the oven.
Just remind me of your question, please.
It was about the bread that's made in a rotisserie oven. Or
Okay, so let me answer that question. Thank you for reminding me. So if you take, let's say, for example, I have bread that's made parv. I needed it. It's parv bread, but now I'm baking it, let's say, in a fleshika oven.
It's ben yomon.
Yeah, it's a ben yoimai. There's no flesh. I'm not doing it together with flesh because I'm not worried about any flesh touching it. But it's so then you're allowed to bake the bread like that, but you're not allowed to eat that bread together with milchiks. That's all. So if you have leftover bread, don't use it with milchiks itself. But you're allowed to bake it. The prohibition is only you're not allowed to bake bread with with dairy itself or meat itself
So if it's baked in the rotisserie oven, in fleshik oven, you have to use it with flesh.
or parv.
Or parv, and the same thing with dairy.
That's correct. Yeah. Okay, now the last question gets into one-bedroom apartments. If you have a one-bedroom apartment and you only have one sink, and you want to keep a kosher kitchen, of course, we have to. So what do you do when you only have one sink? And you can't designate the sink to be either fleishiks or milchiks because it's only one sink. You haven't got two sinks.
We can put hot food or water.
You have hot water, washing. It's a question, right?
Can you just wash it above?
So there's a couple of things that can be done. And a lot of young couples, they do this because when you rent a small apartment, that's what you have. You make the best of what you have. Sometimes the sinks, sometimes the apartments will have double sinks, depends. It's better not to use the same sink to rinse fleshik utensils and the same sink to use to rinse milchik utensils because it's too close for comfort and then you have residue and all that. It's a tricky situation. Someone only has one sink, so then they have no choice. What do you do? And they have to rinse and clean milchige vessels and fleshige vessels. You can use them one of the three following ways. Don't put any utensil inside the sink itself. The sink is just a place to collect the water that's dripping off, but you don't put anything down in the sink. In other words, you're basically saying the sink is treif. And then you're holding whatever you're washing, so then there's no problem because you have water coming from the tap, washing my milchik dishes at a separate time, so fleshik dishes, but nothing's touching the actual sink itself. I'm fine.
It doesn't sound realistic.
You're right. It's very theoretical. It's hard to actually get to. So there's three different ways to do it. A second way is to designate. They sell. If you go to the local hardware store, they sell these tubs, plastic tubs, and they sell a plastic basin that raises up the tub off the floor of the oven of the sink. Excuse me. So then you can basically have your fleshige dishes soaking in a fleshige tub. So basically, it's a sink within a sink. And the milk ones have their own. So you're basically creating an insulated environment now. That's good. No, it's better to actually put something down on the bottom of the sink so that you can give it some elevation. Or you can. A third option is you can just take two perforated racks that are again raised off the floor of the sink. Right, and then one for vasari, one for chalavi, one for fleshik, one for milchiks. So when you're rinsing fleshik vessels, you put down the fleshik kelim on there. And then when you finish with that, you take out the fleshik dish rack and you replace that with a milchik dish rack, and then you put down the milchik pots or pans or plates, whatever it is, on the milchik rack. And it's proper that these racks should be a little bit high, meaning that like an inch off the floor from the sink, in order that the water from the bottom of the sink should not touch the plates. You got you should also be careful that the drain faucet, the drain on the bottom, should not get stuffed up. Because if the water starts to build up, then the water is going to touch the pots or the plates, which is a problem. So make sure everything's going to flow and drain nicely, and then you're good. That concludes the halachas of bas b'chalas. The first thing is you can hold on to the pots the whole time, or the plates. The second thing is you can have tubs. And the third option is just to have racks. But if you do tubs, you need tubs and racks because you have to have the tubs elevated off the floor of the sink. Is that clear? Yeah. Any questions on what we said? Okay, I'll introduce the next subject in a moment. Just want to share a story with you that happened to me yesterday. It was the Kosher Fest was yesterday. Kosher Fest.
Yeah.
What?
Kosher Fest is it's a yearly event. It's the world's largest kiddush.
Yeah.
It's in New Jersey, in the Meadowlands. There's like hundreds of kosher, companies, sometimes restaurants too, but they're showing off their products, and you can come sample them. The Jewish people are very happy. They're going around, sampling the food. It's very. Anyway, it was smaller this year because the first time they had it since COVID, but Baruch Hashem, everyone got to meet in person. So I was there. It's a 2-day show. I went to the second day, Wednesday. Anyway, I was in touch with one of my mashkichim yesterday. I had a problem with one of my factories where they brought in some ingredients that were not approved. They weren't using them, but they wanted to sample them. I wasn't happy with them having them. I told them I want them to be removed. I sent them some communication about it, and I wanted to follow up on it. And the owner of the company was being very difficult about it. They weren't doing violations, but they were just being difficult, weren't answering me clearly. I was trying to get to the bottom of this. So I called my mashgiach and I said, when is the next time you do to go to visit the factory? Because mashgiachim visit factories all the time. They have a schedule. Because I was traveling, I couldn't look on the computer system. He says, I'm going to be there in, say, tomorrow or today or tomorrow. I said, great, call me before you go in. I want to talk to you about it. I want you to call me from the factory itself. And I said to him, before you go into the factory, when you come in, things could explode. The guy's upset. I mean, just be prepared. It might be like a whole drama there. He says, I know. I said, say a kapitel tehillim before you go in. Everything should just go smooth and should be. He said a kapitel tehillim before he went in. And he goes in and he says, the owner did everything I told him to do. Took out everything. It's clear. It's good. Everything was fine, smooth. I said, Mamish, Yad Hashem. Said a kapitel tehillim. Everything went smooth, Baruch Hashem. It was just very special. Anyway, okay. Let's introduce the next subject, a shtickle. A shtickle means a little bit. We only have a few minutes, so it's shtickle is a Yiddish term, a little time. So let me give you a little hakdama. So now we're going to start with the halachas of pas akum, bishul akum, and cholav akum. These are rabbinic prohibitions. Meaning that in the Chumash itself, you're not going to find these things written. The halachas of basar b'chalav are clearly written in the Torah. You're not allowed to cook a kid goat in its mother's milk. The prohibition of pas akum, bishul akum, cholav akum are not written in the Torah openly. It's a rabbinic prohibition. It's brought down the Gemara on Avodah Zarah from the Mishnah, and the Chacham established these prohibitions, etc. And the Chacham established this prohibition with a certain conscious decision in mind. There's a reason for it. It wasn't just, they woke up one day and decided they wanted to do this. No, there's a reason for it. Why? The Chacham, first of all, just to put it in context, food is very powerful. I mean, ask any shliach. The draw on Shabbos is the kiddush or Friday night meal, whether if you're inviting guests over, that's what's makarev people. They see the atmosphere, the family dynamics, just the aura. It's powerful. It's a powerful draw. Plus the chicken soup, the kugel and the chicken and rice. It's very gishmak. It draws people in. So the Chachamim basically said that we see the power of food. We have to harness it and use it according to Torah. Use it in a Torah-like fashion. Meaning to say, if we don't put certain safety nets, certain boundaries with regards to the power of food, it can lead to a situation where there'll be mingling between the Jew and the non-Jew, and that could lead to intermarriage. And therefore they said that with regards to certain foods, and as we're going to explain in detail, a Jew must be involved in the cooking or baking process. It's not permissible for the non-Jew to make the food entirely from beginning to end, because if they do, it can create a feeling of, wow, you did me such a wonderful thing. Let me give you an example. If I have a potato, it's a raw potato, and I have no cooking device, I'm not going to bite into it. It doesn't taste good. If I have raw meat and I have no cooking device, I also am not going to bite into it. But if you have someone, gets a fire going and then you cook it, it's like, wow, you took something that was inedible. It's like a rock, basically. Before you cook it, it's like a rock. It doesn't do you any good. But now you made it into a delicious, succulent type of meal. It's going to create a feeling of, wow, I'm so indebted to you. Thank you so much, etc., etc., etc. The Chacham said, oh, careful, hold it. We have to be careful. Let's create a certain boundary. And let's do this right. We can eat. We have to eat. Let's do it responsibly. The Chacham from the times of the Gemara.
How can I make chicken parm again?
Wait, who is
They
it?
develop in the lab, maybe.
Yeah.
Who writes it?
The Tanoim. If you want to know the exact year it was established, I have to look it up. You can probably Google it. Brought down in the Mishnah. It's a Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, Daf Lamed Hey, page 35, I believe. So now we're going to give an introduction onto these laws. So these laws really encompass three different subjects. Pas, which is bread. Bishul, foods that are cooked. And cholav, dairy foods. All these foods have to be prepared in a Torah responsible manner, which means to say, besides the fact we have to make sure that the ingredients are kosher, that the kelim are kosher, the vessels are kosher. In addition, they have to be prepared in a kosher prescribed manner, which means to say, if I take kosher ingredients, and I take kosher meat, let's say kosher meat, or I take kosher bread, and it's all kosher, it's not going to be kosher if it's not prepared kosher. It has to also be prepared in a kosher manner. So if meat was, let's say, cooked by a non-Jew, kosher meat, kosher pots, but if the fire was turned on by a non-Jew and no Jew touched the fire, then that meat becomes bishul akum. It's not kosher. And bread could be pas akum also if it's baked without a Jew's participation. The Gemara actually details even more prohibitions. There was a prohibition against oil, but that didn't stand. It didn't take on the strength of law. It didn't go into effect. Some of these prohibitions are also a strictly rabbinic prohibition, and some of them are a prohibition that we shouldn't come to an Isser Torah. I'll give you an example. The prohibition against pas akum and bishul akum, the Chachamim said, if you're going to have these foods, then you might come to mingle with a non-Jew, your neighbor, and then you might come to have, your son marries their daughter, your daughter marries their son, and come to intermarriage. So in other words, the act itself, we're worried that it could lead to something that could lead to intermarriage.
So that's why it's so separate?
Yes. By cholav akum, the concern is even stronger. We're worried that if you have a non-Jew doing the milking, they could put in non-kosher milk into the milk itself. So it's more of an immediate concern, which is why the laws of cholav akum are stricter. Until now, we spoke about the halachas that are isser, the ikar isser is minatayr, like possible cholav. Ulam yesh masur she said there are some rabbinic prohibitions that are strictly rabbinic in nature. The Chacham established this. And amongst them, foods that are prepared by a goy, pasakum, bread baked by a non-Jew, bishul akum, foods cooked by a non-Jew, cholav shalakum, milk that's milked by a non-Jew, vinas akum, cheese that was made by a non-Jew, stam yenim, and wine that was prepared by a non-Jew. Some of those things I just mentioned are based on an Isser Torah. Cholav shalakum, vinas akum, cholav akum, and vinas akum. Commissioner Yisrael as well explained that there you're concerned that maybe they put in mamish forbidden food in the Torah in those foods. Some of them are only a reason it's a rabbinic prohibition because we're afraid of mingling. Okay, we're gonna have to stop here. It's time. Have a good Shabbos. Mitzvah Shem will continue on next week. Welcome.